Hey again, welcome to the Cropster podcast where we discuss all things coffee and tech with industry leaders. I'm Nick Castellano here with my co-host Norbert Niederhauser. In our next episode, we'll discuss how tech can empower the coffee industry along with insights Norbert gained from introducing Cropster technology to coffee professionals in Colombia. Cropster has grown from a producer solution to a cloud-based solution from origin to cafe since those days. Norbert brings more insight and a deep knowledge of what can be achieved for the future. Welcome back to another Cropster podcast. I'm here with my co-host Norbert. Norbert, how's everything? How are you?
Hey, good, Nick. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for organizing this. Things are great. It's a really lovely, wonderful, sunny day here in
Nice.
Sacramento.
Oh, nice. I'm happy to hear that. Look, I wanted to just kind of jump straight into things. I really wanted to pick your brain a little bit today about the topic on tech empowerment in coffee, what that looks like, what the future of tech is in coffee. I know it's kind of loaded and kind of really generalized topic, but there's a lot we can cover and spin on here. But it's something super interesting, and I think a lot of our listeners would want to just hear what you have to say about it. I know, like, specifically in origin, tech is not usually sometimes a widely accepted form of living your daily life, and I have a lot of experience in that. And just to kind of jump straight into things, I mean, what in general, like what place does tech have in coffee now and in the future?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Really broad, also broad one.
Yeah.
I think in general, I mean, tech is everywhere. So tech is part of our life. Tech is part of our society, and it's not a local phenomena or something you only see in certain countries. You really see it globally. So technology developments are global, and the specific technology developments we're talking about more is, of course, like IT services, internet connected platforms, internet connected devices, apps. All those developments, they are truly global. So that's the, when I go back into my early days, I always wanted to do something working with people, being useful, being helpful, and connecting humanity. Now, one of those approaches were doing social work, and it was fantastic on a very local level, and also very rewarding. But then I also discovered my love for technology, and that's where I then thought, well, with modern IT systems, I left high school '95, so that
Nice.
was when the internet was getting public, or that was the first year we could have access to the internet in Austria. That's where I grew up. So the last 30 years really have been an amazing time in terms of how that type of technology has developed, and especially the last 10 years were amazing. How mobile networks and apps and mobile phones, or mobile devices in general, have developed. So and looking into the past, amazing what has happened.
Yeah.
And then I really want to look a little bit into the future, because I think there's so much more to come, and so much more to build upon.
Yeah, and what's crazy? Like you say something about just in the past 10 years, it's been like rapid, like the way tech has advanced. I saw a video yesterday of the iPhone. Just 10 years ago, the iPhone 4 came out. Now all of a sudden we have the iPhone 12. It's wild. It's really interesting, honestly. But really quick, I know you have, in the last episode, you told us a little bit about your story and Cropster's origins and roots and how they go back to Colombia and your time spent there. And I know you have some really interesting stories about introducing technology to people in origin, not just producers, but people across the entire supply chain. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, and or even tell us a story of introducing your day-to-day technologies to these people, and what their reactions were to it or how they accepted it.
Yeah, that was one of my really good stories, but also really impactful endeavors and studies we did. That was about, I would say, probably 2007 when we went 2000 and maybe a little bit 2005. We went to the fields to the producers in Colombia to present them with a new device. We programmed back then. There was no iPhone, right? There was
Hmm,
no,
hmm.
uh, no smart devices. But we had something called the HP iPAC. It's a PDA,
Okay.
a personal digital assistant,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, it
It's like
sounded
a it's like a
wild.
it's like a tablet or an iPad kind of, or
I mean, it's a really, really small version of an iPad in so many
okay.
ways. So it was basically an address book and a way of putting down some notes and maybe two, three other apps. But really, just
Cool.
an extended address book, which was already really mind blowing to have your phone numbers and addresses and some notes on those contacts with you more than the I don't know, 30, 40, 50 contacts you could store on your SIM card in your phone. And that was only a name back then and a number.
Nice.
So then suddenly you had an address and you had a birthday and you had all those things.
Yeah.
But what was also cool was you could operate it with a stylus. So you had, and with your fingers actually. And that's what we actually also tried. So you could do a stylus or you can
Okay.
really just use your fingers and tap on it. It just was super small, so that the screen size was very limited and the resolution was very low. So you really saw all the pixels. Well, anyway, back then we tried to push the boundaries a little bit. So we brought this device to farmers and asked them to enter four simple questions. And we programmed different types of interfaces. Some were more
Okay.
focused on the farmer entering and writing, and others were more focused on farmer selecting. Um,
Okay.
and in general, the first reaction was the farmer would come back to us and say, "Hey, this is a really expensive device. I don't know. I shouldn't hold it because what if I, if I drop it?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. We are here to not test you. We are here to test the device. If the
Yep.
device drops and breaks, it's the device's problem. If the device doesn't work or you feel not comfortable, then it wasn't programmed in the way it should have been programmed." And that's a totally new paradigm which was developed in those days of user interface design, human machine interface design. That's a big field of study. I think we have come a long way. It's still at the heart of many, many companies, including Cropster, where we have a few UX designers. Their daily job is to make sure that user interfaces are usable.
In a
And
way, it's kind of like, instead of you working for the tech needs to be working for you.
absolutely, that's exactly the
Okay.
baseline, and that was the big shift because before the computer was very like a bizarre device in a certain sense, and even so when I started, I don't know, 92, I guess was my first IBM compatible computer. That's what it was called.
That's
Uh,
before I was born.
yeah, see, that's how old I am. No, it was amazing. We had Windows version 2.0, right?
Oh,
On
nice. Yeah.
4 floppy disks. A thing you probably have only seen in a museum, or maybe not used. I don't know.
I don't even think I've ever even seen one.
Yeah, well, I think I still have a few somewhere. So super low capacity. Anyway, so in those days, you really had to kind of know how to operate the machine.
Mhm.
And I think that's fair enough if the machine is fairly new and it was already insanely cool what you could do in terms of how to program it and how to install certain things and how versatile it was in so many ways. But it was definitely not designed for humans. But also for that extra step, we didn't have the capacity. So the computer just had a limited calculation power.
Mhm.
And that calculation power was exactly used for that, to calculating the most important things. So focus on mathematical calculations, focusing on um, getting the program to run and not to look pretty. So graphic is really something which came over the last 10, 20 years more and
Mhm.
more. If you want a better graphic, you had to invest in a graphic chip. And that's still the case. So for gamers,
Yeah.
gamer PCs or gamer computers, they are you still want to make that upgrade for that
Mhm.
specific task. So interface tasks, um, we including graphical output to the screen, but also including like certain interfaces like a touch screen or how you say that the different movements you can do with your hands and fingers or gestures. All
Mhm.
this requires power, and it requires that calculation power which now we have.
Mhm.
And not only in big computers, but also in small computers like our cell phones. When you
Mhm.
look at how powerful those chips are, how much memory we have available, it's insane
Yeah.
on a really small chip. So that all allows us to design more for the people. So going back to the study, what was important to me or to us back in those days was, are we even going into the right direction? If you program a device, how does the farmer feel? Do they
Mhm.
feel comfortable, or do they not like it?
Yeah.
And it was an overwhelming positive response. So we asked them a
Oh,
few
that's
things
great.
like, do you trust the device? Do you trust the device more than paper? And the outcome was yes, definitely. We trust the device more than a piece of
Wow.
paper.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's wild because a lot of times you think people, like, they don't trust their iPhones, let alone, like, that newer technology. So it's motivating to hear, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, super cool. And then also we learned things we didn't anticipate. So we were hoping, of course, that people would like the device. We really made some effort to make it easy for them, which made them to like that program we wrote even more. um, but then we found out something which I wasn't really thinking of. It was, so we asked a few farmers about that about this piece of paper, how they felt about it. And some were really shy, and they wouldn't want to write anything on paper. And it's like, yeah, you can skip that part, just do the device. And they were doing really great with the device. And then afterwards they told us, look, honestly, the thing is, I cannot read. I cannot write. So they were saying, hey,
Wow.
I can read. I can read okay, but I don't know how to write. I never learned it. So those were 60 plus old 70-year-old farmers in remote places in Colombia. That's just not was never part of their education. They really never needed it very much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and, like,
opening up to us and telling us, look, hey, I have certain limitations here, but your device overcomes that because I can make a selection from a list of options. It's like this, yes,
yeah.
I feel included. I feel more included than you giving me a piece of paper. I was like, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I want to
Yeah.
do.
And that's crazy because, like, that's something so that to me, at least in my generation, seems so simple and just you wouldn't think about this difference of, like, writing versus touching a screen. But for some people who don't have maybe as much access to education or beforehand access to technology, like, that's such a huge difference and it empowers them to allow them to go that step further in what they're doing, not just with their business, but with their day to day. So, like,
Absolutely, and that goes in so many ways. So we reflected on that. So it's like, well, now we have all the emojis where you can express yourself in a different way. Now you have color schemes you can use. There is all kinds of ways, sliders without numbers. So people can indicate, do they feel more or less about something, or strong or less strong about something. So all those like fuzzy readings are now a better way to communicate. So
Yeah.
it's not as precise. You have to put everything in writing, and it has to be in a certain, following a certain school. Um, and that I think is that's the inclusive part of technology. So once you have that device, you can connect much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's honestly so important too, like the idea of inclusivity with technology, just because, like in so many producing countries around the world, and not even just Latin America, where probably you and I have more experience, but in Africa and Asia and Southeast Asia, like the the idea to make technology inclusive also makes it accessible. And if you can't make a technology inclusive in that way, then I don't think it helps those people in origin to continue to move forward and progress into whether it's they're producing in their business, like what they want to achieve. By making those technologies inclusive, it helps them make that next step forward in what they want to make and what they want to do.
Absolutely, and that's technology is also a thing of scale. So when we look at
Yeah.
computers, building one computer is outrageously expensive. Improving a piece of software for just one person is super expensive
Hmm.
and complicated. Now, but doing it for thousands or millions of people, that's suddenly things become much more interesting. And then, of course, the use itself for networks, for like social networks, of course, but any types of communication devices, the more people who are part of it, the more that technology will thrive and will be meaningful. So to me, one example is when I grew up in a time where we had local phone numbers. So you would have to add in certain area code to call out of your region, and if you do, or if you did back then, you would have to pay more. So it was like
Mm.
the further the distance of your call, the more you had to pay. And international calls was, for me, when I grew up, almost a thing of that was impossible. And now, 40 years later, um, we 30 years later, I call my aunt. She's 80 something years old, and she's in perfect shape. We have a great relationship. And whenever I call her, she says, "Norbert, I cannot believe that you're calling me ac- across continents, and I hear you like you would stand next to me." And she's always a little bit worried. It's like, we have to hang up. It will cost you a fortune. And it's like, no, it's actually free, or I don't know. It maybe cost a cent or something, but it's totally different, right? And that
Yeah.
that now is, I sometimes bring the simple examples because more people can maybe relate with their friends and families who live in
Hmm.
other places. But in coffee, this is the case for most partners in the coffee supply chain. So when a coffee roaster buys coffee, they don't buy it from a local farmer. They buy it
Hmm.
from someone really far away.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
having that farmer using the same technology, using all the platforms we have out there, from WhatsApp and Skype and it doesn't matter. They all now integrated, and you can basically talk for free. There's more platforms coming, translating your calls even, um, and that brings us closer. That brings the
Yeah.
whole supply chain together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I had my fair share of wow, like we can actually do this with technology. I think I was like 17 or something like that when I learned of no, 16 or 17 when I learned about WhatsApp. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, just with this one little app on my phone, I can call people across the world and get my point across in a matter of seconds." Like me being young, that's even for me, that was it was mind-blowing, I will say. I say the least. It was mind-blowing.
Absolutely, because it happened so kind of overnight.
Yeah.
It's really happened rapid. When I lived in Colombia, I had to go to the call centers to make a call to Austria. And I know
Mm.
it was a dollar or even more, maybe almost $2 per minute or so. So I wouldn't go every day. Well, first of all, I wouldn't go every day because I didn't have the time to go, but also it was still quite expensive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that really it changed so quickly. So email was a great option, but we all know email is limited. It's not the same. So transmitting and like, hey, yeah, I'm alive, or hey, here's a picture, or that was all good. But this vocal conversations and or
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
video conversations, and that's what we have
Oh,
now
yeah.
on our cell phones, right? I
Yeah.
call my brother, and we talk on on video, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like, oh, and by the way, I have this new plant, and so I can show him, and that's wonderful. And the same happens, by the way, with the farmers. So when I call some of my friends in South America and in Central America, Guatemala, um, he's like, oh yeah, I'm at the field right now. Show, see, look, here's the field is flowering, and it's like, oh, I'm right at the coffee farm right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
uh, and I feel so connected.
And that's what's so amazing too, just on the idea of like tech empowerment and coffee. I think it also extends to the other side of the supply chain, the consumers. With this, just as simple as like videos, for example, it allows consumers now to be able to travel to origin without actually physically going to origin, which has its pros and cons. But I think for the majority of consumers who don't necessarily have the ability, the accessibility, or the means to be able to go to origin, just the simple technology of video and video communication allows the consumers now to be more hands-on and more involved at origin wherever they choose to be involved at in the coffee supply chain, or at least understand more of, which helps then promote those ideas of like transparency and traceability and whatnot.
Absolutely, and it's, if you cannot go, then you can at least have an idea. But if you can go, then you can keep your relationships or your whatever you've started on during that trip alive for much longer.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's also an experience. I haven't seen some of my coffee friends. One of them is he lives in Costa Rica. I haven't seen him for 5 years. So
Oh wow.
which was surprising, right? Just the other day, I looked through my pictures. May 2016, I was having coffee with Mario. We're still in touch. We write each other sometimes. And I sent him this picture and I was like, dude, I haven't seen you for 5 years, but communication technology makes it possible so that we are still in touch. And yeah, of course, I want to go back. I want to have another coffee, and I want to
Yeah.
talk about all those good things happening and not so good things happening. But
Yeah. Of
it's
course.
it keeps a relationship.
Absolutely.
Um, but I would like to shift a little bit towards. I think that the base layers of communication are super important. So
Yep.
we have this. We have communication. But we also saw. Let's just think back again. What happened with phone services 20 years ago, 10 years
Hmm.
ago, where you want to book a hotel, you call them. You want to buy something somewhere, you call them. You
Yeah.
would you would do everything was done on the phone call,
Yep.
and that is nice to a certain extent, but it's
Eh.
also super inefficient.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where I think all those internet platforms come in, the apps come in, which
Yeah.
help us to organize data and be faster, be more targeted,
Hmm.
and um, really leave the time for communication for some maybe more meaningful conversations. Or for
Absolutely.
same for like I always see it from both sides. As a consumer, you don't want to be in line holding for 20 minutes until someone takes your call.
Yeah.
And as a company, it's hard to provide so many lines of phone service, not knowing how many people will actually call you or not do not have those consumers waiting too long. So you want to kind of reserve them for the most impactful conversation, or if something really goes wrong or someone really needs personalized help.
Mm.
So you
Yep.
shift whatever's self-service and whatever people can do on their own, they should do online in their apps, fairly easy. And the rest, you can still keep those also fairly expensive communication lines open and
Mhm.
serve your customers better.
Yeah, so it's this idea of like personalization and customization and allowing giving the putting the ball in the consumer's court and giving the control to the consumer to feel like they are navigating the way they want to navigate through whatever they're using or whatever
Right.
platform they're a part of. Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for like for me, like I don't know how many people take advantage of this, but I think of like when I think of this conversation, I think of Google Flights.
Hmm.
Like Google Flights for me is like this crazy tool that like I can literally choose which dates exactly without having to talk to someone, and this platform does it for me, and I can see on a calendar how much the prices are, what the costs are, and I have full control over like, no, I want to go this date or that date, or I want to choose this airline or that airline,
Hmm.
rather than spending time before Google Flights was on, rather than spending time like going to each airline's website and wasting time trying to, well, this airline has that price and that airline has that price, but maybe not knowing of another airline that has another price
Hmm.
that may be cheaper. So yeah, I mean, I totally know what you mean. This using those communication areas with people more effectively, but also, using other tools to bypass those unneeded forms of communication.
Right. And we have added values. So
Yeah,
by having data or feeding data into systems, we create histories. We
there you go.
create certain dependencies or relationships between data points, and that now allow us. So, for example, the Google flights, they will understand over time what is your preference. Oh, he always
Mm,
searches for the best price. So let's find the best prices. Or he always looks for the best connection, or he always wants to go through a certain airport
mm,
because on we've probably he sees a friend there on an international trip, or there's all
yeah,
those
yeah.
things you learn when you have data in a system, and then you can go back and make even more use of that data.
Hmm.
I think that's the same for our coffee farmers. If they would just tell you every day how it as I said, it's really nice to connect to the farmers. Like, how does the field look like today? Is it blooming? Is it what's the status? But having it available in the system where I constantly can look certain things up, including, of course, the farmer, or starting with the farmer, so that they know how's their weather, how was the weather pattern over the last half year or year, or over the last 5 years, 10 years, and how did that relate to outbreaks of coffee rust, leaf rust, or coffee quality, or quantity, or so many things.
Yeah.
And that is of course like next. Well, I would say this is this level of understanding we have, and next level in terms of making even more use of large data sets. Again, big data is not new. We've talked about it 10 years ago. We understood back then that accumulating more and more data sets can be extremely powerful.
Hmm.
So tools like artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're there to kind of tame those huge data sets and and
Yeah.
and bring order into it, and understanding. Um, but we also always need to be careful how far we want to push, and always reflect on, is the result meaningful, and
Hmm.
is the result possible? Um, my, I don't know, sixth grade math teacher always taught me, like, you should estimate. When you do a calculation in your head, it's not necessary that you come out at the exactly right point. But if you go to a supermarket and buy 10 packs of $5 items, it will not cost more than $50, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
If
Yeah.
if they ask for 500, then there's a comma error,
Yeah.
or if they ask for 150, something is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
it's a simple things, and so if you same thing with you buy 7 hotel nights each for $123. Well, you just estimate and say, well, it's probably 800, somewhere around 850. I don't know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
you should
Exactly.
it should be in that neighborhood, and that's what you always need to do, also with large data sets, to make sure that you end up in a range which is plausible, possible. Double check, and then really also reflect on, is this also meaningful?
Yeah. That's
There's
true.
a lot of things out there we do because we can. Technology can do it,
Hmm.
but what is the meaning to it?
What's the value added?
What's the value added exactly? Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for sure. And there's so much to unpack here. Like I'm like I'll have all these like now different ideas and topics like just that we'll get to in future episodes. But a little bit shifting gears a little more. So before this, I would have made the generalization that like older I was going to say old people, older generations would be more skeptical of technology, but I've come to learn that that's actually not the case. So I'm going to phrase this question in a way where it's where what would you say to people just in general who are skeptical of accepting technology and implementing it into their daily lives or business? In this case, we'll talk about the coffee supply chain. But I don't want to say that it's a generational thing because I've learned that it's not a generational thing. And it can be of any age, any demographic that is either willing or not willing to accept technology. So for those people who aren't willing to accept it, what is something you would say to them?
Mhm. Yeah, those are great points. Well, yeah, I'm with you. I think it's not necessarily a generational thing. It just might take a little bit longer for older people to adopt technology. So you
Hmm.
always have like the early adopters, and then you followers, and then everybody else. Um, and that just goes over a certain amount of time. I feel older people might have seen already so much change, or have seen so many things, and they organize their way their life in a way that they're happy with. So there might be less need for maybe new excitement or change, because they feel comfortable and they feel they have what they need, until they learn otherwise. And that's where, for example, cell phones, yes, well, it takes some older generations maybe a little bit longer to take the new phones on. At the current state, I think that already happened. uh,
Hmm.
and that shift probably happened last five also the last 5 years was
Yeah.
enormous. I saw, again, I'm not a researcher, so I don't know what the percentages is. I just look around, and I've seen my parents getting a phone, and then my aunt getting a smartphone, and then my people in their age group,
Hmm.
and then I saw them communicating with each other via WhatsApp. So and that, I think that was the shift. They suddenly could send each other pictures. They
Hmm.
could make pictures with their phone. So they didn't need a camera anymore. They didn't need to have special knowledge of taking a picture, downloading that picture from the camera onto a computer, processing it. All this, like, it's gone. Just take the picture, send it to your son, and it's there, right? So
Yeah.
so it's again, there's this benefit, and once they see the benefit, they of course shift towards that technology. Would they do certain things? Even going to the bank, that was definitely a big shift from, oh no,
Yeah.
I rather go and talk to the nice person on the counter. And it's, I grew up in a small village, so everybody knows each other, so it's also a social kind of a social visit in a certain sense. And now it's like, oh, I need to do a transfer. It like takes me 3 seconds. I open my app, put
Yeah, yeah.
put in the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's still the case in, like, Latin America. Like, a lot of people still don't even have banks, you know? Like,
That's
I
right.
have some
That's right. So, and that's
that
that's something we need to talk about for sure. What that shift will be in terms of like fintech and
yeah.
and those things. Um, but so to my point is more, if there's a need, if there is a value, as you say, if the added
Mhm.
value doesn't matter the generation. Now, if someone is hesitant, I think that's where a good starting point is. It's like, why do you think this is not for you, or why do you think it is not useful? So sometimes it's it's arguments you can work with and say, well, I didn't understand your specific need, or I didn't understand your specific situation. Or you can also, of course, then come and say, well, my experience is this. This is the benefits, and if they feel that the benefit is also for them, again, if there's value add, they will come around. There's a lot of it goes from, oh, I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's kind of an easy one, right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, you feel
Exactly.
uncomfortable. It's like, all right, well,
What
um,
exactly are you uncomfortable about?
exactly. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, I don't know. I have fat fingers. I don't know. Like, the device is smart. It's not about your fingers. Uh, Actually, a lot of people can work with. And if you really feel like there's smaller and larger devices, so those are, to
Yeah.
me, that those are the simple things. And then just go somewhere. And what we did with the farmers, we gave them the device into their hands.
Yeah.
See, that's where like the Apple Store is a good example of that, like, church of technology, where you go in and you touch those things. And
Yeah.
well, not last year, but this year
Before.
again.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this year, yeah, yeah.
And you can connect and then feel the device and see, is this actually something you want to hold in your hands, or not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny you say that, like, this idea of touch, because just a funny story. I had a
Mhm.
high school teacher. She swore and had this thing that she could only use, I think it was, Android phones, because her fingers were always cold and dry, so the iPhones could never catch the heat sensor that I guess they had on their old iPhones. I don't know if it's still the case now, but she swore that her body only allowed her to use Android products. And for me at the time, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're full of it. Like, get over yourself." But it's just so funny you say that, because like it makes me think of that, like, just this in general of idea of like the touch. It does play a big factor, I think, in the use of technology. I mean, technology is like, for me, uh, when I think of technology, I think of a cloud, virtual, remote, all these different adjectives. But also, people want technology to be humane, personal. They want it to be at their fingertips, but not feel like there's some robot.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
towards your teacher or your experience there, I think we have a huge variety now of devices we can select, and it's like going into a restaurant. I
Hmm.
have my preference what I want to eat and how I want it prepared, or even into what restaurant I want to go in and into what restaurant I don't want to go. Um, and I think while it is nice to have a certain unification of devices, and I mean, ultimately there's not so many devices you can choose from, right?
Hmm.
You can
Hmm.
go, if you're an end consumer without special knowledge, you can really just go iOS, Apple, or you go Android,
Yeah.
and that's about it. And then there's a few
Literally, yeah.
more like
I think
derivatives.
Huawei in China, like Huawei's its own, right?
I don't know,
Okay.
possibly, but I think it's all Android based derivatives.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but anyway, it's I think that there's not such a wild choice, but still
Yeah.
enough, especially in end devices. There is a good number of phones you can have, or pads, or computers, and laptops or whatever. So I had to learn to be a little bit more open towards certain devices, especially with my family. I feel of course I want the best for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they were choosing something I would not choose, then it's their decision. We can still communicate, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. It's not that we have a barrier built up just because of that. It's like, no, it's their choice. It's what they want. It's great. It's all good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and then, again, back to the original question. Some people feel overwhelmed with technology because they don't have anybody close by who helps them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Some things are easy, as we said. Well, yes, human computer interface design or UX UI has done amazing things, but it's still not the easiest. So certain things are still not so easy. Or you want,
Hmm.
going the first time to your online bank can be intimidating.
Hmm.
So having someone around who shows you, who kind of accompanies you, who looks you over the shoulder, and it's like, all right, click here, don't click here, or oh, you just clicked here, that's why you left the app. Don't worry, no, your data is not gone, but you have to go back in. You have to click again.
Hmm.
Stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
that definitely helps. And then there's like, oh, Big Brother, yes and no. Also there, knowing a little bit more, digging a little bit deeper, knowing how certain companies use your data or don't
Hmm.
use your data is important, but it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody to read those 50-page privacy and terms of service documents in a legal voice. Also there, huge companies or a lot of companies, also big companies, are moving more and more towards human readable contracts, which are
Absolutely.
really understandable. Well, there might be still a second legal version to it, but it gives you a good idea of what they want,
Yeah.
or what the deal is between you and
Yep.
them. And while you can always kind of think like, oh, they do what they want, well, there is a huge community out there. If so many people don't like what WhatsApp is doing with the data, then there was huge shifts going to Signal and to all those other apps.
Hmm.
So they had to come around and make some adjustments
Yeah. Absolutely.
to not totally lose the market. So I think we're living in an exciting time for that, and everybody's takes their own decisions on that. In that sense, it it is kind of I think it's a democratic process in a certain sense. What app you
Yep.
use, what provider you use, where you spend your money, where you put your data, that's also super important.
The democratization of tech. And that in itself is another topic. And before we go on more and more topics, I think I've definitely understood there's so much more to unpack, so many topics we can to cover, so many topics that can be applied to coffee. It's super, super interesting. And I'm really looking forward to more topics in our future episodes. Thanks again, Norbert, for shining some knowledge on this important topic. And I know we're going to have some really, really good conversations about this in the future as well.
Fantastic, Nick. Yes, I think so too. I'm excited, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cropster podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to our channel to always get the latest episode. If you're interested in more educational content on all things coffee and tech, be sure to head to cropster.com/learn or visit our YouTube channel. Cheers to more coffee.